I can't hear anything. Okay. I don't hear anything. Good. Hey, I'm on the Zoom meeting for the special meeting tonight. I can't get any sound. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks.
transfer from unappropriated available funds $160,000 to increase the budget for employee benefits of line number 7.2.
The motion has been made, the motion has been seconded. Advisory.
Advisory recommends favorable action.
Got a motion, we've got a second, we've got the recommendation. Questions from the floor. Start with Jim.
James Smith, we just have a little background on this thing.
Couple of things, the board, back last year voted to increase the benefits of our share that we pay for health benefits for employees, parity with other towns. We increased it from 50 to 60%, 60 to 70, and then next year we go to 75%, which is a significant increase. That was about $42,000. And the last budget, we neglected to put in funding for Medicare, was $48,000. There was $3,000 stipend to the treasurer, assessor, and clerk for being certified with under Massachusetts law. They're allowed to do that if you voted at town meeting. And then there was and is going to be anticipated retirements in which we pay still unused sick leave according to contracts.
I saw a second question somewhere. We put Brandon.
If I'm understanding that, Brandon, does this mean that we're increasing to 60%, and Shirley's paying 40%?
Correct.
Okay, that's all I'm looking
Yeah, most of the towns are at 75, 25.
Yeah. No. But that's okay, as long, the percentages here, they're paying their part.
Yeah.
We're paying our share.
Any other questions? See none. This requires a majority vote. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? This is unanimous. Article 5, Government Study Committee. To see if the town will vote to authorize creation of a government study committee to review all aspects of Hampden town government and to issue a report or key recommendations to the annual town meeting in May 2024 or take any other action relative thereto.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town vote authorize the creation of a government study committee appointed by the moderator to review all aspects of Hampden town government and to issue a report with any recommendation to the annual town meeting, May 2024.
The motion, we have a second? We have a second. Does the advisory committee recommend?
Advisory recommends favorable action.
We have a motion, second. Are you folks doing background or do you want me to just do a brief overview of what we're talking about? Okay. So to start with, my goal in this whole thing ends as soon as the committee is appointed. This, we come up that over the years, Hampden hadn't really taken a look at governance, select board on down, forms of government that are currently in place, the delivery of service, all the aspects that go with running a small town. And so it was suggested that we have a committee of town residents with support, and there will be support for anyone who is inclined to be a part of this through the Mass Municipal Association, access to town council. Everything will be available to the committee that agrees to look at this. And the committee may well come back and say everything is fine, may come back and say there are things that could be done differently. I'm not going to say anything that would predispose the potential committee to what they should be looking at or thinking. And I apologize if it comes out as something vague, but it's on purpose with the intent from the board of selectmen that they are not involved with this, they are not running it, and the moderator will step aside after the committee is appointed. Whoever chooses to serve will be autonomous and independent, looking at the best interest of providing government service. And that's really all there is for a background. This vote is simply as to whether or not the committee is formed. That said, with a motion and a second, are there any, I really questions will be tricky, but if there are any, yes. Please call.
Was there something in particular that somebody identified as wrong with the way the government now?
I didn't get a sense of that from the conversations that were had, and quite frankly, there were not many. It's been many years since we've updated the master plan in town. A lot of towns through the did some homework on the Mass Municipal Association. And what they actually have a group of people that does support and does help with background and question answering on this. And it appears from the research I did that there are many communities doing it, whether it's cost efficiency, delivery. I've talked to attorneys who say that working with some municipalities is easier than others because they may have a full-time building department. And again, I'm trying to be careful not to predispose the committee to what to look at, but the direct answer is no. I hope that helps. Yes, sir.
That's about 55 Island Circle. I guess the puzzling part to me is you say you are going to be gone. So this committee is going to do their thing until 2024. Then why are you gone? If you're serving a function now, why is the committee taking over with you?
So the reason that the moderator would step aside is because at some point, the committee would author some kind of report. So let's back up a step in that I would appoint the committee and step aside. The committee would create its own structure, chair, vice chair, so on and so forth. And then do the due diligence to putting together a report with changes, if any. Now, to the question, the reason I would step aside is because the impartiality of the moderator cannot be called into question. And if I stayed with the committee or did any work with the committee, the issue would become when it came to town meeting for a vote, my impartiality would absolutely be questioned because I work with the committee. So I have to step out. But again, my expectations, whatever committee is formed, quite frankly, this is a community of pretty bright people. Robert's rules is not the hardest thing to solve. And with the appointment of a chair and vice chair and that type of thing, I think the committee will function just not will, it will. If it's chosen, I say will, if it's chosen, if this body votes it down, this is done. But if the body votes it, my sense of the committee would operate like any other committee in town. And let me just say, one of the reasons for having this question is because when this first started, when it was first kind of brought up, it started with me reaching out to people. It started with trying to get the word out and expressions of interest. And quite frankly, we ended up with the same 10, 12 people that we end up with all the time. And some of the times we only end up with those same 6, 7, 8, 10 people is because we don't do a good enough job getting the word out so that other folks might have the ability to become part of it. So it was my suggestion to put this on the warrant so that if nothing else, the word would be out there and folks, somebody who's never served on a committee before might come and say, you know what, I have an interest in this. There's actually a sign-up sheet here. So again, this is a committee that I'd really like to see not be the same 6, 8, 10 people who do so much. And then so many feel disenfranchised. So that's the other part of the answer. I just want to get that out. And I did see another question.
You answered my question, thank you.
Okay. Mary Ellen.
Was there any consideration that this article should be on the spring town meeting where there would be more people in attendance and would participate in the decision making?
There was some conversation about that. What the reason that we started this, and be aware, when I was a selectman and even now, I'm incredibly cognizant of what should be considered an annual and special. One of the reasons for the consideration at this time was to allow the committee as much time as practical to have this in by the 2024 town meeting. And by doing it now, it really gives it an extra 6 months to work on. And it could well be that if a committee is chosen, if a committee is appointed, if it clears this up, that the committee may say we're not ready and we'll have to be continued. My suggestion then would be that it be continued to the next annual town meeting. I don't think we should hear the results anywhere other than an annual town meeting, whether it's 24, 25. But if nothing else, if we can at least get the word out, and hopefully there's no people watching this, that they'll be willing to call in and throw their name, because we're not going to appoint this tomorrow. We really just wanted to get the word out to as many people as possible that this was happening.
And then a follow-up question, will the report that it comes up with, will the town meeting have the approval? They will make a recommendation that A happens, and then the town meeting will approve that?
Yes. Yeah, and now I'm speaking, I want to be really careful. Again, I'm not trying to dance with you, but I want this to be as broad a conversation as possible. Any recommendations that the committee were to ultimately make would have to be considered by town meeting and potentially a vote. Some may even require an actual act of the legislature. So it's not going to happen in a vacuum. And whatever report, if any, lands on the desk, it's not the end, and it's not the be all end all. It's not a decision. That can only occur here. Have we addressed it all? I see another, Mr. Matthews.
John Matthews, North Hudson Road. You had mentioned the master plan, and I guess my question is, the planning board is working on bringing forward a master plan. Why wouldn't this government study be incorporated into the master? I'm just questioning.
No, hey, look at, you and I have had enough conversation. I respect your question and your opinion. That hadn't been brought up as a consideration. So I'm not saying it's wrong not to do it that way. And I did mention, I know the master plan is being worked on, but prior to this, it's been so long since it had been done. Like so many things that just kind of sit on the shelf, we kind of, after a while, we all forget what they said. And it is, the master plan is being updated as we speak, but that wasn't brought up as an option. And I actually think it may have started, don't hold this, because my recollection isn't always like right to the calendar day. This conversation may have started after the due diligence has been updating the master plan. But either way, it was mentioned as an option. Anything else? All right, seeing no more. All those in favor of the formation of this committee, this requires a majority vote. Any opposed? Motion carries. That said, please, there is a sign-up list up here, and there's one, I'm gonna move it out into the hallway so when people leave, but if you have an interest, put your name down and we'll go from there. Article 6, additional funding for emergency management. To see if the town will vote to raise, appropriate, and or transfer from unappropriated available funds, some money to increase funding for emergency management or take any other action relative thereto. Hey, you're up.
Mr. Moderator, I move the town vote to transfer $5,000 from unappropriated available funds to increase the budget for emergency management.
We have a motion, we have a second, advisory.
Advisory recommends favorable action.
Are there any questions from the floor? I see one, Rita.
How much was that?
5,000.
5,000. Any other questions? I see a second, please.
Heather Beatty, South Hampton Road, just what are these funds slated to do?
So we switched our emergency management service from Wave to Blackboard Connect. There was a transfer cost, a license fee, maintenance cost. It's just stuff to get it up and running.
Any other questions? I think that might follow on. Seeing none. Oh, there is a second. Grant. What is the number right now? I thought it was 5,000, but I think it's 5,000 now, so this debate is 10.
Of what? I mean, snowstorm.
It's like the reverse 911 system. So you can input your name number and you can get a phone call from the town for any emergency related needs, town elections, town meetings, stuff like that.
No, we got that now. We got them on me.
Right, it's switched services. So you are getting it now, you're correct. It's from this new service. Just to fund the needs.
But they need more money to do that.
It's the new service. It's the new software license. Yeah.
Software license is the bane of our existence. But, are you set? Are there any other questions on this? This requires a majority vote again. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion carries. Article 7, additional funding for law and claims. To see if the town will vote to raise, appropriate, or transfer from unappropriated available funds a sum of money to increase funding for legal services or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to transfer $75,000 from unappropriated available funds to increase the budget for water and claims, line 8.0. Got a motion, we got a second. The advisory committee,
Advisory recommends favorable action.
we've got the motion second, we have favorable action from the recommendation from the advisory. Are there any questions from the floor? Seeing none. Oh, lady.
Actually, some of this common ground, I want to know why. We're making motions, that we get some explanation of why. Increasing funds. Be very helpful. Thank you.
That's a great question. 3 words, lawyers cost money. And you all know that. The town has some ongoing things right now that are probably going to overdraw the current law and claims account by quite a bit. Obviously, you know, we have the ongoing legal situation with the storage units. There are some other things, employment issues that are in executive session that are costing us quite a bit as well. And there are other anticipated expenses coming down the road. We did have a number in mind, we worked with the advisory on it. It's a look, take a bite of the apple, make it right. You don't spend it, it comes back in free cash next year. But don't come back to us again in the spring looking for more. 100% great. So this is the number we're very sure that we'll get it. Any other questions?
Could you say the sum again? Not the amount.
75,000.
Thank you.
Any other questions? See another one, yes, sir.
Jennifer Leonard, what's the amount currently before this edition?
65 is in there now.
More than double.
Any other questions? Seeing none, this also requires a majority vote. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? This one is unanimous. I would just like to make a point to your question or your comment about offering follow-up to every motion. As a rule, I'm not going to do that. The body has every right to ask questions, and I will acknowledge any question as long as it's not redundant. But some folks have always expressed an interest in having an expeditious town meeting. If the body is comfortable with the motion, the second, and they want to move on, if you have a question, please ask me. But if there's not one, I'm inclined to just keep it going. Article 8, additional funding for the Board of Health expenses. To see if the town will vote to raise, appropriate, or transfer from unappropriated available funds a sum of money to increase funding for the Board of Health or take any other action relative thereto.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to transfer $2,000 from unappropriated available funds for Board of Health expenses, line item 6.
Got a motion and a second. Is there advisory recommendation?
Advisory recommends favorable action.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, this requires a majority vote. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? This is unanimous. Article 9, reimburse for Minichog Land Trust. To see if the town will vote to raise, appropriate, or transfer from unappropriated available funds the sum of money to reimburse the Minichog Land Trust for cost overruns on previously approved removal of dead and dying trees at the South Road entrance to the Minichog Mountain Conservation Land and or for grinding of stumps that remain in the site or take any other action relative thereto. Motion.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to transfer from unappropriated available funds the sum of $6,909.26 to reimburse the Minnesota Land Trust for its payment to Northern Tree Inc. The removal of dead and dying town trees at the town-owned South Road entrance to the Minnesota Mountain Conservation Plan.
We have a motion. We have a second. Does the advisory committee have a recommendation?
Advisory recommends favorable action.
Are there any questions for background information from the floor? Jen?
Is this possible to come from the community preservation funds instead? Question for people who didn't hear it is, could this come from community preservation, CPA fund? We discussed that, and because this falls under the category maintenance, we can't fund it through CPA. It would have to be a capital improvement project. It's big enough to have to qualify for that as a maintenance.
Is that, any other questions? I thought I saw, yes, please.
$6,994.26.
I saw another hand going somewhere. Are we all set? This also requires a majority vote. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? This motion is unanimous. Article 10, reducing the tax rate. To see if the town will vote to transfer from unappropriated available funds a sum of money for the purpose of reducing the tax rate for fiscal 2023 or take any other action relative thereto.
I move that the town take no action on this article.
We have a motion, we have a second. How does the advisory committee feel about its own motion?
Fantastic. Favorable action.
I think Carol did cover some of this in her summation when we started, but always questions are encouraged if you have any questions with regard to taking no action. Seeing none, this requires again a majority vote. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion carries. We are on Article 11, which I believe is our last one, so transfer to the general stabilization account to see if the town will vote to transfer a sum of money from unappropriated available funds to the general stabilization account and take any other action relative thereto. Motion.
I move that the town vote to transfer $449,584.74 from unappropriated available funds into the general stabilization account.
Does that have a second? Motion second. I'm gonna ask anyway. How do you feel?
Favorable action it is.
2 for 2. Are there any questions from the board? Seeing none, this is a majority vote. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? This one is unanimous. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Got a motion? Sure, there's a second. Go enjoy the game. Thank you.